Canadian Texas. It's everything you think of when you think of a small town. And of course it has Friday night football.
Well, we've got about 31 minutes before we kick this Region 1 semifinal game off. Before we take another quick timeout, I want to say that we come on the air tonight with some troubled hearts.
But in the background, something dark and profound was going on.
No one disappears from Canadian Texas.
He just vanished.
I was scared, and I just thought, I can't lose anybody else.
There's a killer among us.
Our belief is we are investigating a homicide at this point. If you're a student at Canadian High School, you could be charged with a crime for withholding information.
We're all kind of going, we don't trust any of you now.
Somebody knows what happened to Tom Brown. Somebody surely knows.
I was in town because we were on Thanksgiving break out of school, and I was excited to see Tom. We had planned, I don't remember what movie we were going to watch, but we had planned to watch a movie when he got home on Thanksgiving Eve. But, he didn't want to do that. That was boring. We'd been in the house all day, so he needed some social time.
Thomas left my house at about 6:15, 6:20 to go hang out with friends, which was completely normal, especially on, a night that we would not have school the next day.
The last thing I said was, I'll see you later. There was nothing abnormal, nothing out of the ordinary. It was just, I'll see you later. What you do around here is drive around and listen to music with your friends. That's what he told me he was going to go do.
It was Tom, Christian Webb, and Caleb King all in the vehicle together. Tom had a very defined loop that he liked to drive, and it was out towards the Canadian Bridge.
We'd go out a little ways out of town, and then we'd turn on a county road.
We would pass by a few friends' houses on the way. We would turn at the football stadium.
Then come back towards town, down another direction.
Thomas had a curfew of midnight, 12 o'clock. Thomas had never broken curfew. So when he wasn't home by 12 o'clock, it did worry me because that just didn't happen for him. So then I texted him, hey, where are you? It's, past your curfew. You need to get home.
We didn't get any messages. And so I called him, and it got sent a voicemail.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system. 806.
Then I texted him again, and I noticed after my second text that it was not delivered. That was more alarming to me because teenage kids are not going to turn a phone off.
I remember looking on the dot at 12:13, and I thought, something's weird. I said, I'll go see, if, he's just talking somewhere, just a little long, and I'll go tell him to come home. My biggest fear, though, is that we might not find him in time to save him if he'd gotten in a car accident.
I called Caleb King's mom because I wasn't sure if he was there. She woke Caleb up because he's in bed asleep. And Caleb also called Christian at her house. The last time Christian and Caleb saw Thomas was about maybe 11:15, 11:20, when they had gone back to the middle school parking lot and had gotten, into their individual cars, and they were all headed home. Christian and Caleb were pretty shocked that he did not show back up at the house.
I was filled with dread, really. And that's kind of when I started to panic and think maybe something went utterly wrong. Just a few years before that, I'd lost my grandmother, and I just thought, I can't lose anybody else.
Everyone in town knew Tom. He had a very outgoing, lighthearted, funny personality.
Thomas was the class president for 2 years. I mean, he was just a big kid, just a big lovable teddy bear almost.
Tom really, he loved football. Canadian is much like any other small town in Texas. You know, football is king. Every other young boy's dream is to grow up to be a Canadian Wildcat football player. Tom, he was a starter his senior year, and he was ecstatic.
Texas football, that's the only way to do, you know. High school football on Friday nights, it's the thing to do. It's the place to be.
The stadium in Canadian has seats for 3,000 people, which is 300 more than the entire population of Canadian itself.
Thomas had won 2 state championships. He was good enough to play on the offensive line.
One of my fondest memories was winning the state semifinal football game on our way to the state football game that year. And me and Tom, we hugged each other and embraced. I was so pumped about it. Not many people get the chance to make it that far. That's pretty awesome. But about midway through his senior year, Tom was replaced. It was kind of a game time decision. Our coach felt like he could trust this other player more than he could Tom. Tom, he was devastated by it.
He decided that he didn't want to be on the team anymore, and he quit.
After he left the football team, I really didn't know who I would use to be my partner anymore. It was weird not having him there.
I called the sheriff's department at about 2:15 or 2:20. It was about an hour and a half, I guess, after I called them before they showed up at my house. It was Deputy Pine Gregory. I was surprised that it took so long. It's a small town. It takes about 10 minutes.
I asked the deputy if I could ride with him, and I would show him some of the places Tom hung out, where he might be. I was getting hysterical, I was anxious, and I was scared.
They drove around, I'm not sure how many hours.
Eventually he said, I'm gonna take you home. I'm gonna go off duty. Sheriff Luce will be on in a few hours.
One of the biggest traditions in Canadian football is to have practice on Thanksgiving morning. It's just a real short practice, a short run through. And I remember we were in our huddle and Coach Cadian came up and told us, he goes, be on the lookout for Tom. He didn't come home last night and nobody's heard from him or seen him.
I was at Alexander's, our local grocery and deli, getting a Coke, as usual. And, you know, everybody was talking about it.
It doesn't take long to find out something in Canadian. Thomas is missing.
We had people that, you know, were willing to do whatever to try and find Thomas. That's what we do.
Lots of community members started gathering to begin to search.
They had four-wheelers, they had horseback, they had people driving around.
So I was trying to be hopeful and not go to the worst case scenario, but I did not know what to think at all. It's a helpless feeling.
Christian and her dad are pilots. He flies helicopters. They went up and they were flying over the county. They're the one that spotted Tom's car.
Sheriff Lewis receives a call with a big development. A car had been found. The sheriff and his people immediately respond.
It was a Dodge Durango. It was red. All the football boys have their cars decorated. Thomas did have writing on his car from the beginning of the year, "Go Cats." So they knew that it was Thomas's car.
They found it by sewage ponds. It stinks out there. Nobody hung out down there.
It was just like Thomas had driven up and parked it, except that he wasn't there.
There's absolutely no sign of Tom at all. Tom has vanished.
Chris and Ken, weekday mornings
It's as American as apple pie.
on 98.3 KXDJ.
Every weekday morning, the people that live east of the Panhandle turn into a little radio station that is hosted by a local DJ named Chris Samples. He's an old-fashioned town crier that lets everybody know what's going on in town.
Do I understand correctly that the young man's vehicle was found abandoned near your water treatment plant facility? Is that correct?
That is correct. We've got the Randall County Sheriff's Posse down here, search and rescue team. They are on horseback searching.
The investigation was led by Nathan Lewis, the sheriff of the county. He was a young man who had just been elected, had been in office for only a couple of months.
They begin looking around and they get inside the vehicle, which is open.
His wallet, keys, cell phone, all of that stuff was gone.
There was the small smear of blood, which turned out to be Tom's blood, on the door handle of the driver's side door. On the floorboard was found a .25 caliber bullet casing.
It's Texas, so everyone has a gun, but not Tom, because Tom didn't like guns. So not something I would expect him to have his hands on.
They find little pieces of evidence, intriguing, mysterious, but there is no sign of Tom whatsoever.
We had a pack of bloodhound dogs in here that's what they do every day. They track scents, and we tracked him east of where the vehicle was found, and they'll come up to a dead end at that point. As soon as the bloodhounds got to the actual water marsh, they lost the scent.
The clock is ticking, and you're just kind of waiting on them to find Tom.
They told us there was nothing for us to do. We just trusted the law enforcement to do what we felt like they needed to do.
I really tried to stay on the positive side of it. I tried to stay away from the thought that he was dead at all, because nothing bad happens here.
Chris, we've had a numerous amount of people over here helping us. And this young man's picture, Bolo, the teletypes, it's on the front of their computer screens. And so law enforcement community, if you will, is just tremendous.
I would say 5 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, the sheriff brought Thomas's car to my house. I said, "You're telling me that you've already processed the car?" "Oh yeah, we don't need it anymore." It was pretty shocking.
We thought, well, that's a little odd, because when you impound it, you have that to fall back on if you need to do forensics later.
I want to say that we come on the air tonight with some troubled hearts, thinking a lot of the Brown family, and thoughts and prayers with you guys, and we'll be hoping for the best and putting this in God's hands.
So that Friday at the Wildcat game, the crowd was very subdued.
What happened? You know, what happened? What happened? Where was he? This is crazy.
I was struggling. Tom had always been the person who had told me, you gotta do what you gotta do, make it happen, do your best. So I went and I did my best. But I had just got a feeling that things were not gonna end up the way we wanted them to.
I was like, man, I wanna play this for Tom because he was very important to me. I was scared that maybe he wasn't coming home.
No one disappears. I mean, not from Canadian Texas, you know. I mean, into thin air, apparently.
Within a few days, I was very concerned about how the investigation was going, and I was so concerned about it that I went to the sheriff's office. And he said to me, when we found the car, I just thought that Thomas committed suicide like your dad had. My mom was a teacher at Canadian High School, and Sheriff Nathan Lewis was a student when my dad committed suicide. I guess he thought that it had been passed down through the family. I was very angry with him when he said that, but it just didn't seem like something Thomas would do. He did not seem depressed. After he quit football, you know, the first week or so was kind of hard, but he decided to turn his attention to theater because that was really something that he liked to do a lot. And he was about to start the fall production for theater or drama, and he was very excited about it. Plus, I didn't know how it could be a suicide if you don't find the body of the person who committed suicide. I had tried to let the sheriff do his job, but I was apprehensive because we did not get off on the right foot. About a year and a half before Thomas went missing, Nathan Lewis and I had an incident. He's a deputy coming in off duty one night, and Thomas had been downtown hanging out with some kids. And he stops them and accuses them of trying to break into a theater on Main Street. He singles Thomas out of the group. You need to get in my car. And the whole time he's using swear words, the F word a lot. And he proceeds to question Thomas in the car about what he's been doing that evening. And Thomas tells him, he goes, I'm on my way home. Eventually, he lets Thomas go home.
My mom and I questioned him numerous times, you know, did you break in there? I mean, was the stop justified? He said, no, our friend lives above it. We didn't break in, and so we said, okay.
I did have to talk to the sheriff's department. I just think that Lewis was mad at me because I called him out for stopping my son.
Well, fast forward to Tom's disappearance, and the last cop that Penny wants investigating the disappearance is Lewis, because she thinks Lewis has a bias against her own son.
I was so upset that I started asking some friends about private investigators, and one of them had given me Philip Klein's name. He specialized in missing persons, missing children.
One of her comments to me was, we need you. This sheriff doesn't know what he's damn well doing. Please, please, please help us. She had me at the first please. I packed my bags and I was headed to the Canadian.
Thomas Brown was last seen just hours before Thanksgiving Day, and since then, the story of his disappearance has captured the attention of people in and around the Texas Panhandle.
A few days after Tom's disappearance, Philip Klein arrives in Canadian in his big black Suburban, pulls up to the sheriff's department. Klein was a big, bold, bombastic, opinionated, hard-hitting private detective. He introduced himself to Sheriff Lewis and says, "I'm Philip Klein, and I'm here to solve the Tom Brown case."
First thing he started talking about, suicide. Oh, Tom killed himself.
I just thought that was BS from the beginning. He would have been upfront with people because he loved us and he respected us and he didn't want people to worry about him.
I interviewed some of his friends, from his ex-girlfriend Sage to his good friend Christian, other boys that knew him, who said that Tom would occasionally get melancholy. But I'd always ask, did it feel like he was acting suicidal? And they would say no.
Christian and Caleb, the friends with him that night, they just said it was a normal night, that they went and drove around. Thomas was funnier than he had been in a long time. You know, he was just rolling with jokes. You know, his character was at a high. Tom had never once mentioned to me that he was depressed or anxious, that he wanted to end his life.
Lewis immediately distrusts Klein. Lewis saw Klein as this overly opinionated figure who came to conclusions before he had the evidence to back those conclusions. Klein saw Lewis as a rookie who didn't know anything about investigations, who was just getting in his way. So Klein begins to do his own investigation. And then within a month after Tom's disappearance, Sheriff Lewis made an appearance on Chris Sample's radio show. And he said that the most likely theory was that Tom had been hitchhiking or was picked up by someone and disappeared from Canadian, left the town altogether.
As time drags on, it honestly got harder and harder, just kind of on how to deal with things, how to cope. Caleb and Christian were snubbed pretty hard, in my personal opinion. Tom and Christian had been friends for quite some time, and I would say they were very close. And I felt like she was poorly treated, so they were just getting a lot of doubt put on them. How did they not know that he was suicidal, or how did they not know that he was planning on running away right after they hung out? I think they got it pretty hard. They were basically blaming them for something that they weren't even presented with in the beginning. So they were just getting a lot of doubt put on their quality of friendship they provided. Christian really struggled. I honestly feel for them very deeply.
I will say that most of everybody has been interviewed by somebody. What we are coming up with by these interviews is going back and determining that the young man did leave voluntarily. We're going to do everything and still do everything we can to locate him and bring him home.
A workman for the local power company, checking some electric lines, was walking through an area off of Lake Marvin Road, and he came across a backpack, which had books in it and a laptop and was sitting perfectly in an upright position. It was Tom's backpack.
The backpack had been there for a while. It was wet. Inside the backpack were Thomas's, some of his school papers and notebooks, and his laptop. The laptop was sent to a forensics lab. All it had was his schoolwork on there. The laptop had not been used since Thomas disappeared. The sheriff told me that he thought Thomas left it there. That is not what I believe.
From that parking space where that Durango was found to where the backpack was found by air would have had to be 5, maybe 6 miles, somewhere in there. You gotta walk through rugged terrain.
Tom wasn't an outdoors person, and that night it was really cold.
You cannot walk across the Canadian River. I mean, you cannot cross the river bottom by foot.
If he was committing suicide, why would he do that? Had someone abducted Tom and taken the backpack and put it on the other side of the fence so that no one could find it? It was just another one of these little mysteries in a story that was getting more and more mysterious all the time.
We started thinking there's more to this case going on than a young man that has just simply disappeared. I brought a cadaver dog and one of the best trainers in the United States on cadaver dogs to Canadian. Remember, the dog doesn't hit on tracking a person. It tracks on human death scent. When you die, immediately your body releases a scent. That dog hit all over that car. There was a dead body in the car. We asked them, can we run the dog on the backpack and see if it'll hit? Why y'all want to do that? They would not allow us to get close to the backpack. Now, if that doesn't tell you something, nothing does. We finally look at each other and go, we're getting blocked by the cops. What in the hell's going on?
Klein begins to get suspicious. He began to think, could there be a murder going on here that's getting covered up? And so his suspicion began to drive his investigation.
Last time we spoke, the backpack evidence had just been unveiled, and that was very suspicious to you.
Everybody wants to talk about a guy that's running away. He never used his credit card. He hasn't used it, and he had no cash on him. You don't have your car. We know he's not a runner. The big question is why was the backpack out on Lake Marvin Road? Was it thrown there? Was it placed there? Our team is investigating this as a homicide. Our phone lines lit up like crazy.
Plenty of rumors started up. Things started to get a little heavier online.
There were rumors that someone had killed him and put his body into a wood chipper and scattered the remains. The speculation just went crazy. The pressure on the great people of Canadian is growing. Banners that would go up would declare, there's a killer among us.
I cannot explain how many rumors were going through town after Tom Brown disappeared. The rumors about Sheriff Lewis were just almost insane. He had some kind of gay love ring going, that he was selling Tom as a sex slave to sex traffickers from out of town. Completely unfounded, completely untrue, and defamatory.
It's all big blow up now of this one says this one says this one says this. It kind of split the town. Either you were for the sheriff's office or you were against the sheriff's office.
I say this, she's missing her son, and I understand that, and like I said, it's very emotional for her. I mean, people talk gossip and the gospel. You're always going to have critics. Most of them don't have a clue what they're talking about or don't know anything about this case. I don't feel bad for myself or anybody up here when those rumors are said, because we all know the truth of it. I don't feel like we have to say anything against it.
Finally, I just said, quit listening to the sheriff. What does your gut tell you? We were told that there was a massive search that was done in the area where the backpack was found. Then we started finding the ranger that was out there. He said, well, we didn't do a line search. I mean, I beat my fist on the table 5 or 6 times. His body's right there. So I organized a search on Lake Marvin Road for Tom Brown's body.
On October the 13th, there's a little bit of welcome to good news when the Canadian Wildcats won a big game over the Childress Bobcats. The next day, some 150 volunteers gathered together on Lake Marvin Road to search for Tom.
The day of the search that Philip conducted, we prayed over them before they started. I told them that, you know, in spite of the situation, which appeared to be nefarious, you know, that they were the good and the light in the world who would come to help, you know, some of them, somebody they didn't even know. And then Philip told us we had to leave and just to go home, and that if they found anything, they would be in touch. He was trying to protect us in case if we had found remains. I mean, would you want your parents to find the remains of their own child?
I was listening to all the radio traffic of all of our people, directing people and that sort of thing, and they called me and said, hey, you need to come back up here to mile marker number 1. We found a phone. It was a rose-colored cell phone, and everybody looked at it and goes, it's in pristine condition. And I said, it fell off of somebody's car, or it's one of the searchers' phones. It was sent out to Quantico. According to the FBI, it was Tom Brown's phone. And that's when we all kind of looked at each other and went, oh my God, what the heck?
It had not been sitting out there for nearly a year. There had been rainstorms, ice storms, mowers going over that area, and the phone was untouched. It looked like it had just come out of the box and had fallen to the ground. If you thought the backpack evidence was mysterious, the discovery of Tom's iPhone is even more mysterious.
It didn't take long for that rumor mill to start. How did it get there?
The speculation is that if somebody has ditched this phone, I think that Sheriff Lewis thought Klein did it. There are people that believe that was plausible.
I think that since the sheriff's department knew where the search was, that someone in the department put the phone out there to try to put the phone into evidence. Since the night he went missing, they kept asking me for that passcode. You don't need it unless you have the phone.
We're dealing with an insider job. We're dealing with an internal thing. Somebody that's in a high place in law enforcement.
I know wholeheartedly that there's nobody at this department that would ever do something like that. We took the case as it come in, and we've done a heck of a job with it. I've had the Texas Rangers and FBI involved in the disappearance.
Quite the opposite. Those men do not like each other at all. They did not respect one another. And it is still ugly to this day.
I have a hard time with conspiracy theories. Some of this suggested stuff really casts dark shadows on Hemphill County law enforcement. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the Texas Rangers are in the business of covering up for small-town law enforcement agencies, are they?
No, absolutely not. But every case takes this twist and turn.
I decided to post a petition on our Facebook page called Moms for Tom to petition the Attorney General's office to get involved and take over Thomas's case. I believe that Thomas's disappearance is a cover-up of something.
So at the beginning of 2018, myself and another investigator named Chris Smith started visiting Canadian to figure out what exactly had happened to Thomas and try to determine who had possibly placed the phone outside just before Philip Klein's search. And it was determined that we would like to polygraph Penny Meek. Once Tom Brown's phone was discovered in pretty much near perfect condition, the OAG determined It was likely that somebody was in possession of Tom's phone since he had disappeared in 2016. So we started steps in trying to determine who that could be. You're always going to use every investigative tool available to you, and one of those tools is a polygraph. We first tested the mother, Penny Meek, in relation to questions about the phone. Penny Meek showed deception on her polygraph. The AG's office could not substantiate her claims that the sheriff's office had asked Penny Meek for the passcode to Thomas's phone.
Penny Meek had in fact asked one of Tom Brown's friends for the passcode to Tom's phone.
Why would Penny want to be inside Tom's phone so quickly? Did that mean she had the phone? And if she did have the phone, that would mean she knew something about where he was the night he disappeared.
But Sheriff Nathan Lewis also showed deception on his polygraph in relation to questions about the phone.
It just completely baffled me. And so you added mystery upon mystery upon mystery.
Penny Meek has said that Sheriff Nathan Lewis was the first person to bring up suicide. However, in Penny's initial interview with law enforcement, just a few days after Thomas went missing, when she's asked what she believes happened, she makes the statement that she thinks he committed suicide. We know that Tom had searched suicide hotline at approximately 9:11 p.m. on that evening. There's 3 entries on the phone, but ultimately we know that he did not call the suicide hotline.
One of the theories that allegedly got connected to Penny was that she was so upset, allegedly, over the suicide of her own father out by Lake Marvin Road that she couldn't handle the idea of her own son committing suicide, and so that she allegedly arranged for Tom's body to be taken away and hidden and left for years.
Penny Meek also showed deception on questions about Thomas's body.
They kept insisting that I had found Thomas and moved his body. That made me angry because that is not true. That's just a ludicrous, ridiculous, absurd theory. I don't know what parent would find their child in a situation like that and then you just walk away and leave them. I would stand before God himself and tell you that I have not seen Thomas since he went missing.
These lie detector tests are not court evidence, but they sure are suggestive that somebody's not telling the entire truth. In January of 2019, Sheriff's Deputy Pine Gregory, even though he was on duty, had taken an hour off to walk through an area near the entrance to Lake Marvin itself, where he came across bones, a skull, a femur, assorted smaller bones.
The AG investigators showed up at our house and they told us that the remains did in fact belong to Thomas.
Nearly 3 years after Tom had disappeared, he finally had been found.
The remains could not give any determination for a cause or a manner of death.
Penny, does finding his remains and knowing for sure now that he's in his heavenly home help you sleep any better at night?
Not really, because I want to know what happened. I deserve to know what happened.
Family, friends, and community members overflowed the Canadian high school gym, all paying their respects to a son, classmate, and role model, Thomas Brown.
It was a nice service, but it was really hard. It's just hard to talk about because it's just so hurtful that he's gone.
They had his Letterman jacket as well as his senior picture. I'll never forget the music they played. I have it on my phone, and I listen to it every once in a while just because it makes me think of Tom. I cried through the whole thing, just having to realize, like, this is confirmation, like, we lost Tom and the morning of that.
In August of 2019, we held a meeting with members of the Hemphill County Sheriff's Department.
What the Attorney General's report concluded was that Sheriff Lewis had nothing to do with the disappearance of Tom, with his death, and where his remains were eventually found.
Until proven otherwise, the only thing that Sheriff Lewis was guilty of is getting in over his head.
The conclusion is that there isn't a conclusion. We don't know what happened to Thomas Brown.
And you just shake your head and say, my God. My God. You really want to know my bottom line? Who the hell is going to stand up for Tom Brown?
I believe that Thomas was murdered. Maybe there's something bad going on with the sheriff. I don't know if he's covering for himself. It's hard. I cannot process what happened after that because I just don't know.
In her desperation and grief, you could see her grabbing hold of some of those theories. But there are a lot of people in town who think Penny is putting on a performance, that her grief is faked, or that she's not revealing what she really knows happened to Tom. But none of us really know. None of us are sure whether it's a performance or whether it's reality.
In Canadian Wildcat fashion, in 2020, in the middle of COVID, they win the state championship.
I do think it's helped with the healing. But a lot of us now are just anxious on a general basis, like who can we trust, who can we not?
This is just a strange case. I still ask myself, what did happen? It is crazy that we cannot solve this mystery at all.
There's still a dark, looming cloud over Canadian. To me, the thing I miss most is the closest that we had. We're the only two that understood each other. And I'm afraid that I'm never gonna have that again.
I just have to keep believing that someday I'll have answers. Maybe I don't hope that Thomas is coming home anymore. He's already home. But I can still hope that we have answers.
After all these years, after all these investigations, we're still sort of where we started. But somebody knows.